At the start of 2020, I discovered a manga named Phantom Seer. So far, only 20 chapters had been released, so it was enough for me to get an idea of what the series was about and whether it was something I would stick to reading. And wow, I never expected myself to get hooked so quickly into a series that was trying to keep its spot within Shonen Jump. Not everything was perfect, but I can say the same about numerous other manga titles when it comes to the first few chapters, as trying to find what works in your story can often lead to trial and error. Regardless, it was nothing major that I thought wouldn't cause problems for its growth later on. That's until a few weeks later, I saw this. Phantom Seer was announced to be ending in Weekly Shonen Jump with only 30 chapters being published altogether, resulting in the series to be just another cancelled manga title. I couldn't believe it, as well as many other confused readers about why this sudden act had to happen. Of course, the simple answer will always be down to sales, as while Phantom Seer never did incredibly, it always did just above average for a new series, especially considering it had barely, if any, promotion for it whatsoever. And it's strange, because when compared to series such as Act Age, which sold worse for its first 3 volumes compared to Phantom Seer, it still got that chance to get that boost in popularity later on, starting with volume 4. Meanwhile, this is all a far cry from Phantom Seer, which got cancelled before its 3rd volume would even release. It's a strange set of circumstances that will most likely never get answered. I don't work for Shonen Jump, so I'll never be able to fully comprehend why this decision took place. However, I can relay the information that's out there to form some opinions of my own. Also, part of this research was not found by myself, but thanks to Ryu Maki, who owns one of the biggest Phantom Seer fan accounts. Even though Phantom Seer has ceased production, it's worth checking out just to see how much love not only the creators had for this series, but also how passionate the fan base was. So if you're at least a slight bit interested, do go check it out. But before we get digging into the actions of Shonen Jump, I'm aware not everyone has heard of this series, so with this being said, let me show you the lost potential of Phantom Seer. The story of Phantom Seer is easy enough for anyone to follow, focusing on a young schoolgirl named Riku who's able to sense dangerous events ahead of time before they happen. But since Riku enjoys helping people, this special power she's always had has never been a bother to her. However, the situation quickly develops upon meeting Iori, an unmotivated and oftentimes rude individual who happens to be a shaman, a role where psychics fend off phantoms that cause a disturbance within everyday life. He informs Riku that she is currently being haunted by a phantom, and so to solve this issue, they must retrace their steps to what they believe is the source of the problem. The rundown of this situation is briefly explained by Iori's older sister, Yayoi, who's basically an example of what a top-class shaman is all about. And while everything comes as a shock to Riku, having all of this frightening information and discoveries being laid upon her, she still confidently accepts to partake, as this new world she's been introduced to might not seem as bad as a situation as she originally thought. It gives her a chance to help people with this sensory ability she's always had, and so if she can put it to better use to make people's lives better, then there's no reason for her to be unhappy. Unfortunately, the situation isn't that simple. When entering the realm of the Phantom's location, an absurd amount of phantoms start to gather, only for Riku to be told that she's the main source these phantoms are attracted to. She wasn't sensing just any typical danger with her abilities, but instead was sensing the danger she was attracting, meaning Riku was drawing other people into hazards rather than helping them this entire time. Her worldview had now been turned upside down to where she now considered herself the biggest liability, her dreams and talents not aligning the way she imagined. However, she isn't alone. Iori's dreams and talents don't match up either, as his talent for being a shaman won't ever allow him to have a normal life he's always envisioned. This is where we see the power a shaman carries, being able to possess their own phantoms to fight for the caster on their behalf. And wow, it is just really cool. The phantoms don't take on a friendly look at all, even if it's being summoned by a good guy character, as it carries on all the horror, animosity and intimidation such a creature is expected to bring to the world. Once the short confrontation ends, Riku and Iori have a really heartfelt conversation about what's next, as Riku isn't even sure about going back to her everyday life surrounded by others due to the liability she has become. Iori's response is so powerful and just perfect all around, giving her comparison of how it's okay for a painter to want to become an athlete, as even though they may not align with each other, it doesn't mean you need to reject your feelings towards what you want to do. You don't have to deny and not allow yourself to progress to the type of individual you want to be, and if that isn't a great message, then I don't know what is. This then sets up the rest of the story to follow, as Iori is forced by his older sister to stick alongside Riku to protect her from the phantoms that have become attracted to her presence. Everything I just talked about was contained within the first chapter of Phantom Seer, and it is an incredibly strong start for a manga. There's great introductions to the world, characters, and abilities that have been offered to the reader, as it's most definitely enough to make you continue reading into the next chapters where even more character building takes place to give the story an overarching goal to lead into, as we discover Iori is hunting down a specific phantom that killed someone close to him. This individual sacrificed her life for Iori, and so it leads to a great character dynamic with himself and Riku, as the themes of sacrifice carry throughout the story and whether it's a conclusion that should easily be considered. And that's honestly one of the best things about Phantom Seer, as the characters that experience these events are incredibly likable and interesting in their own ways. Having a protagonist that is just a straight up arsehole at times is an interesting change of pace from the standard norm of main characters in shonen, leading to some really hilarious situations, such as when Iori and Riku get informed about the location of the phantom that's haunting Riku, as it's built up to make you think both of them will head to the scene together, only for Iori to immediately back down from the situation. Or even a scenario earlier where I explained how much I loved the message Iori gives to Riku about not rejecting your feelings, to then Iori basically saying in the very next page that he was talking about himself, not her, followed by instantly leaving like the situation had been left on good terms. Of course, he isn't always obnoxious, as it's shown multiple times that he does care for others deep down and will act if the situation forces him to. He just has a funny way of showing it sometimes. Having a main character be an unpleasant individual, I can partially understand why some may not take a liking to him, but for me, it just made him more interesting and fun to watch whenever he was taking part, as it's a personality that actually lightens up the mood for the type of dangerous events the story would progress to, making Iori a really good balance for the story to not take itself too seriously or get too depressing. Riku is also an excellent character who I fell in love with straight away. She's easily likable because of her endearing personality with wanting to help others, as well as being an incredibly strong female lead who pushes herself to develop into the type of person she wants to become. Protecting people isn't so simple anymore as moving one person out of the way. Now that she's been forced into this new world, she now has to come to grips with protecting others from stronger forces, as her growth as a character excels her to the point where she quickly isn't seen as a hindrance that attracts phantoms, but now as a psychic that has the power to stop these forces herself. And as mentioned before, she's a perfect companion to have alongside Iori, sharing similar ideals while also just overall having a good character dynamic as the story progresses. For the other side characters of Phantom Seer, while not nearly as interesting as the main duo, they were still engaging nonetheless with the attitudes and techniques they brought to the narrative. Like Kenma's caring connection to his phantoms and not believing they should be treated as weapons, to Chihiro, who's very flashy with both his personality and his actions, corresponding perfectly with his abilities focused around pyrokinesis. These characters really do make the story better, even if they're instantly not the most deepest thing in the world. Keep in mind, this is only the start of Phantom Seer, so it's perfectly acceptable for them to start off as very easy to understand. This leads into the story, which has had its fair share of criticisms for being generic, yet I've always found the word generic to be a very weird way of trying to insult a series. There's nothing wrong with sticking to tropes, as long as it's being done well in an effective manner that keeps you engaged, which is exactly what Phantom Seer did for me. And while sure, it can be considered generic, what's less talked about is how Phantom Seer added its own spice to make things more interesting and less expected of what people believed it to be. And that extra element was through its visual horror. There are certain panels within this series that really makes it feel like the genre has just shifted to something else completely, as these grotesque pieces of imagery only show up every so often to break the mindset of believing this series was sticking to the casual shonen formula, such as this scene where a deluded teacher mixes the body parts of a schoolgirl brutally to create a hybrid creature which can only be described as something from a nightmare. This nightmarish imagery only works well, however, thanks to the stunning artwork Phantom Seer delivers. The images I've been shown throughout this video should give you a clear indication of just how gorgeous this series looks, especially when reading from page to page, as the composition of characters and panel layouts really help to emphasize the care that has gone into the look of this manga. Regardless of how you may feel about the story, the artwork that has been produced here is nothing less than beautiful. Whether it be the perfect use of weighted lines of characters that show the energy of a situation, or a more smoother approach to show off a delicate moment that's taken place. And wow, when coloured, it just gets even more impressive. It's a shame there's only a few coloured pages we got, but it only helps my point on showcasing just how magnificently beautiful Phantom Seer looks. The same applies with the volume covers, as each demonstrate the charm the series carries through its visuals alone. Overall, there really is a lot to love about Phantom Seer, but unfortunately, with all of this going for it, it was still heading towards an abrupt cancellation. While I have my praises for the series, I do also have my fair share of criticisms, just like any other manga I've engaged with. And I'm not saying the points I'm bringing up are reasons for why it met an early end, but I do think it's important to point out not only what worked, but what also didn't work, considering how short-lived Phantom Seer was. As great as the artwork looks, it doesn't save the series from some uninteresting encounters the main cast stumble into. I've never been a fan of the Monster of the Week structure because of how quickly villains enter and leave the story, not really cementing a spot within the narrative, as it fails to create a lasting impact that you as the reader as well as the characters won't even remember. And it's fine to have this structure at the start of your story, as it's an easy way to show an early image of what this world entails. A lot of other manga follow this layout too before leading into a more interesting story. But this continues on all the way up to chapter 20 to where it finally feels like a bigger story is starting to follow, at last giving the series a moment where it's not just a random disjointed event, but one that flows perfectly into a more interesting story arc to come. Though with Phantom Seer being only 30 chapters, that promise of a much more enticing story unfortunately doesn't get the full time it needs to unravel. And it's clear that around chapter 20, the author was starting to extend his scope to what looked like antagonists that were going to bring a much more interesting set of conflicts to the table, but that opportunity was never given the chance to shine. Senju Doji, the Phantom Iori is hunting, is the most praise I can give the series for trying to have a compelling force of evil, but even she could use a lot more room to develop a bigger interest for herself as a character. I can even say the same about one of the main cast members, such as Iori's sister, Yayoi, who is probably the most hollow character out of everyone, which really sucks because of the powerful presence she's supposed to have on this story. She's really just there to basically give information, as she unfortunately feels like a plot device more than her own character at all. Excluding one scene that demonstrates the power a top-class shaman possesses, whenever she's on the page, most of what you'll be getting is information dumping. There's other critiques I could give the series, but I don't think the rest is fair to judge, such as Iori's built-up past turning out to be a pretty anticlimactic backstory that practically gets thrown into the final chapters of the story. It's not fair to judge this area of the narrative, as I'm sure around chapter 27, when Iori's backstory shows signs of being told, is when the authors were told to wrap up the plot in any way they can. This leads into the topic of the cancellation of Phantom Seer, as while the criticism I brought up can be seen as something valid to discuss in my eyes personally, all of these points were not massive deal breakers, when in fact majority of what I disliked shows signs of developing itself out from what felt like the uncertain path the story was originally heading towards. So maybe it's just a case of not digging out of that hole sooner? Who knows? I don't work for Shonen Jump, so I'll never know the behind the scenes of what took place when discussing the future of Phantom Seer. So the conclusions I get to will be purely based on my own intuition, meaning anyone is more than welcome to state an opinion that's completely different as long as it has some believable weight behind it. Let's get into the most understandable reason for why Phantom Seer most likely got axed. the sales. Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Phantom Seer were estimated to have each sold around 22k for the first month of their releases. And while that isn't record-breaking numbers, it's still a pretty decent amount for a new series that wasn't getting any promotion whatsoever. Comparing this to series that are still currently being published in Shonen Jump at the time of recording this video, me and Roboco, as well as Hard Boiled Cop. Oh, hi, it's Mikey from the future. So during editing this video, it turns out Hard Boiled Cop might actually be ending in Shonen Jump within the week. It's not confirmed yet, but it most likely might be the case. But I'm still gonna keep in all of my examples because it was still publishing in Shonen Jump when Phantom Seer got axed for a few weeks later. I'm going to assume that it got cancelled. So yeah. Okay, back to the video. Have been selling much worse in comparison to Phantom Seer, as they struggled to not even reach 15k within the month of their volume's release. And this is with both of these series now on their third volume, which is a far cry from Phantom Seer, which got cancelled before its own third volume got released. And even after being cancelled, when the third volume of Phantom Seer did eventually release, it still managed to do much better than the two series I had previously mentioned, selling just over 24k volumes for the first month of its release. And remember, Phantom Seer had practically no promotion, while Hard Boiled Cop and Roboco had their advertisement through stickers. And sure, stickers aren't the biggest thing in the world, yet it's still promotion Phantom Seer was excluded from, only getting a voiced comic near the start of its run, which every other series got. Roboco was especially getting a lot of attention from Jump super early into its publication, though I would assume this is from the shout out it got from the author of The Promised Neverland, who recommended the series and so wanted to ride the large attention the series could possibly gain. And having your series been recommended by one of the most successful manga authors in recent times is really a big push in terms of promotion. And to be clear, I'm not hating on either one of these series. How I feel about them has nothing to do with the information I've just relayed, but instead used as examples to show how almost unfairly Phantom Seer got treated. These two authors have already danced in the manga industry before, so I can only assume they got more opportunities to stay within Jump's pages because of the chance they might make another successful piece of work that will print money. But while we're still on the topic of volume sales, this is a good time to bring back the information given at the start of the video. The manga Act Age was allowed to continue publication even after having poor sales for its first 3 volumes, only managing to skyrocket in sales when it reached its 4th volume, while Phantom Seer never got that chance. What's even more strange about this is that Phantom Seer needed reprints for both the first 2 volumes of its initial release, as the demand was much higher than Shonen Jump anticipated. And even with this clear demand, Phantom Seer was for the majority of its lifetime always ranked at the bottom of the table of contents. For those who don't know, the table of contents is the position each manga takes within the magazine. This is decided by the sub-chief editor of Shonen Jump, who will generally organize this order of their own accord. And this is very important stuff, as generally you'll want to keep the most interesting and popular series at the front, such as One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen, while having your least popular series right at the back. Now, to clear this up, the table of contents do not represent the sales order of each series, but rather the decision of one individual who decides what order these titles should be in. However, I don't think it's a stretch to say the most popular titles are always at the top, while the least popular are always at the bottom. And while Phantom Seer wasn't doing record numbers and was instead just doing decent overall, it would never move from its bottom spots, rarely ever getting the chance to move higher up for a possibility of developing newfound attention. This is of course excluding its first 5 weeks of publication, where it's guaranteed a high spot in the magazine, which every manga gets. What you're seeing on screen is 18 times Phantom Seer had its newest chapter being published right at the bottom of Weekly Shonen Jump. And keep in mind, Phantom Seer only ran for 30 chapters, so this means over half of its lifetime was spent straight at the back of the magazine, all while series such as Roboco was getting multiple chances to be pushed up to the forefront. Even with the positive reception, decently strong sales and a demand for the manga, Phantom Seer just felt like it was in a losing battle with Jump, till eventually the worst result happened. The 4th of April would be the final day Phantom Seer would appear in Weekly Shonen Jump, having one last chapter to try to wrap up a finale in the quickest way possible. And man, it's just sad to see such a promising manga go like this. To give you some insight, the author Togo Goto had tried to develop Phantom Seer through multiple one-shots, becoming lucky in 2018 when partnered up with Matsuura Kento to produce the artwork while Togo focused on the story, winning Jump's Golden Future Cup Award and granting them both the chance to serialize Phantom Seer within Jump. It's clear this isn't a manga that was rushed into, but one that had a lot of thought and dedication surrounding it. This also isn't the first time the artist Kentaro Matsuura has faced cancellation, having previously worked on Tokyo Shinobi Squad, which also met an early end. Unfortunately, this is the ruthless environment mangaka enter when it comes to surviving the pages of Shonen Jump, Phantom Seer being the example of how quickly your work can be taken off the magazine completely. And Phantom Seer is always going to remain a special case. As I've stated numerous times, I don't and will most likely never understand what truly happened to make Shonen Jump get to this outcome. While it's easy to blame sales, it becomes questionable when compared to other series that haven't been doing any better than Phantom Seer. There's also the possibility that there's just too many spiritual, or I guess exorcism manga that have been entering Shonen Jump recently, but I find this a weird reason to get rid of a series, as Shonen Jump is known for having a lot of manga that dwindle within the same genre and themes because they know it's something that will print money easily. And even if this was the case, then it wouldn't make sense to let Phantom Seer begin publication to begin with if the genre it was entering was already too crowded, so I find this reason unlikely to be the case. If anything, I feel the most logical reason is Shonen Jump overprinting too many copies of Phantom Seer once the first batch had sold out, jumping the gun on thinking the series was blowing up when in reality it was selling a lot less than anticipated. Right now, Phantom Seer has 150,000 copies in circulation, which is an extraordinary amount for a fresh series, so perhaps they overestimated in that area, expecting to make a lot more sales. But even if that was the case, as shown, Phantom Seer rarely got the chance to be put up to the front of the magazine for people to discover, potentially losing out on those extra sales Jump was looking for. Like I said, I just don't really know and it's unfortunate. But what I do know is that Shonen Jump just lost one of its series that held the most potential, which we'll unfortunately never get to witness. So that's it for this video. There was a lot I wanted to talk about since Phantom Seer really meant a lot to me in terms of becoming a promising series, and me spending the time to make this video should hopefully show how passionate I was about it. And if this video has piqued your interest in the slightest, then I would highly recommend checking out the manga for yourself if you haven't already. It's only 30 chapters, so it's a quick read to get through even if the author didn't manage to finish the story he wanted to tell. Then if you end up liking Phantom Seer, we can both anticipate the return of the author and artist to the manga industry, as hopefully they'll have a better run the next time they decide on what their following series will be. So with that being said, if you liked anything I've talked about regarding Phantom Seer, then please give the video a like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can be notified when I upload my next video. It's for free and it lets me know you're enjoying my content, so if you're at least a slight bit interested, you might as well stick along for the ride. And also, do feel free to comment below if there's anything you'd like to talk about, whether it's to do with Phantom Seer or manga in general. Whatever the discussion is, I'll make sure to check it out. And with this, thank you all so much for watching the video to the very end. Hope you all have a great day and bless.